how's it going, everybody? I'm Office Barta. I'm ready with my real deep visors, so let's do this. You may have gathered, this is not my usual video. I've decided to do a countdown of my favorite Star Wars movies from worst to best. I wanted to do this for two reasons. One, I wanted to do it leading up to The Last Jedi, and two, I thought it would be a good way to fit in a mini review of The Last Jedi. Without further ado, this is my list of my favorite Star Wars movies ranked, including Rogue One. On that note, here we go. Starting off our list, we have Attack of the Clones. Oh my god, what a mess. Nothing about this film seems exciting, interesting, or even worthy of getting its own feature. It has this terrible love story that you don't buy whatsoever, and when it's not doing that, it's just a bunch of action scenes that don't have a reason for existing. Even the lightsaber fight, there's this one point where they're just swinging them around. They're not even hitting anything, it's just... Not to mention information that conflicts with what had been said previously. Possession is forbidden. Except for this lightsaber, because this lightsaber is your life. Also, when Mace Windu says, "We're keepers of the peace, not soldiers." An hour later, slices Jango's head with 300 Jedi just throwing down in this arena. Man, if that ain't keeping the peace, I don't know what is. It's a middle chapter that has no purpose. You can literally just watch Revenge of the Sith and Phantom Menace. And speaking of the latter... Next up, we have Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. I wasn't even alive for the hate parade that this movie got, so I don't have as strong feelings for it. But I can agree that this film is not good. At all. The story is all over the place, the characters just aren't interesting, and the climax is overcrammed and unnecessarily big. But the bigness doesn't feel warranted because the rest of the film is just boring politics. I will say one thing though, the lightsaber fight is one of the best in the saga. Although Darth Maul did end up being... half the man he used to be. Other than that, it's just a boring political film with that guy from Taken and the kid from Jingle All the Way. Run, folks. Run for thy life. At number 7, we have Rogue One. Now, I don't think this is a bad movie. Far from it. It has a nice visual aesthetic as well as an exciting space battle at the end, but it just kind of feels like 2 hours of nothing. Although it looks nice and has some good action, what does it really do for Star Wars as a whole? What does it do to expand the universe or bring the saga to a new place? We see them steal the Death Star plans, but does that really warrant its own movie? Rogue One is still a decent film with some solid performances, but that doesn't change the fact that it really has nothing to say. Next up is Revenge of the Sith. I put this above Rogue One because a lot of people still don't like this film, but it does a lot to expand Star Wars and features some incredible moments. It actually has my favorite scene in all of Star Wars, which is the scene at the Opera House. No big action, no flinging lightsabers. Just a great villain telling a compelling story to his young pupil. And it fits everything the prequels needed to do in just one movie. It shows Anakin's turn to the dark side, how the Empire came to power, and it takes the saga to a much darker place than it had ever been. However, some of the dumb factors from the last two prequels are still apparent here. The love dialogue is still horribly unnatural, and aside from Palpatine, the villains are just a couple of dopes. So Revenge of the Sith still has a lot of problems, but it's still a captivating tale and a good conclusion to a not-so-good trilogy. Speaking of final chapters, next up is Return of the Jedi. It's probably the weakest of the original trilogy in terms of its execution, primarily because it played things a little too safe. They have to destroy a second Death Star, which seems kinda ridiculous in itself. But that's not really the point of the story. The point is Luke's confrontation with the Emperor. And that is what makes this movie. Luke is tested, he's tempted, he's challenged as a hero. But in the end, he redeems his father, a fallen hero, and Darth Vader destroys his master. It's triumphant, satisfying, and worthy of the final chapter. Except for Ewoks. They were Jar Jar before Jar Jar was Jar Jar. Overall, our heroes defeat the Empire and bring the saga to a satisfying end. Except it's not the end, but we'll get to that later. At number 4 is the one that started it all, Star Wars. This was George Lucas's first real step into the mainstream, and for good reason. It has lovable characters, a gripping story, and special effects that were way ahead of their time, and are still impressive today. But it also feels hokey and stilted in parts, since it was just made as a fun space adventure for kids. But for the most part, the film works well in its craziness and made the world fall in love with this galaxy. So this film was definitely a worthy start to the franchise, but the fact is, I can think of 3 other movies that can top it. Starting with... At At number 3 is Star Wars: The Last Jedi. Now, I know people are split about this film, and I get it, people are entitled to their opinions, but it's kind of hard when I feel like I'm not allowed to like this movie. Because I loved it. It gives Star Wars something new in every sense, new visual scope, new sense of the mythos, and I had a great experience watching it with my friends after a movie marathon that we had. After people complaining that Force Awakens was just a rehash of A New Hope, I thought for a while this would be a rehash of Empire. And there are some moments when it does that. But it also shakes things up and blends familiar elements into a new and exciting story. However, though it's new, that doesn't always mean it's well executed. There are some moments where the film can have pacing issues, considering it's the longest film in the franchise. The film has a couple storylines and arcs that don't always come together, and the film had some potential that they didn't always take full advantage of. But nonetheless, what it does well, it does extremely well. The Last Jedi brought a fresh new perspective on something so beloved, and that's exactly why I love it. I had a hard time making this choice because I felt like these two could have interchanged. But I thought about it and I put Empire Strikes Back at number 2. The Empire Strikes Back is a fine example of what a sequel should do. It needs to present characters with new challenges, bring them to darker places, and put them to the test. Most sequels nowadays just tend to do the same old thing over and over again. But if they want to be remembered, they need to consider looking back at this. Like its predecessor, Empire is new and inventive, with even better special effects, and features some of the best twists in cinema history. So for that, I personally think that Empire is the best Star Wars. So why is it at number 2? Well, I do realize Empire is the best, but it isn't my favorite. This next one is my favorite, and it is. Here it is, guys, number 1. You can probably guess what this is. If you can, I'll give you 3 seconds. 1, 2, 3. Yep, Star Wars: The Force Awakens is my number 1. Let me point out why this is here. It's not the best film. It's not the smartest film. It's not even the best written film. But this was the film that triggered my love for Star Wars. Whenever people talk about their best memory with Star Wars, this is what comes to mind for me. It put that adventurous spirit back in our hearts, it gave our favorite characters much needed emotional depths, and introduced new characters that brought a new light to an old franchise. However, there's this whole complaint about how it's derivative of A New Hope, and that's a valid complaint to make. But even if this type of story has been told before, the way they tell it is what makes it refreshing and gives it its own identity. The Force Awakens is a reminder of why we love Star Wars and a well-written love letter to childhood. Anyway, that was my list of my favorite Star Wars movies ranked from worst to best. What do you think of my list? Did you agree with it? Actually, I'd like to know what you think. Leave your own lists in the comment section below, and I'll be sure to check them out. Okay, everybody, I'm signing off, so be sure to check out the rest of my channel in the future, and click that big subscribe button for more awesomeness and more me. So like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you at the movies. I'm out!